This is the Lenovo IdeaPad 5 2-in-1 9th generation. This is specifically the 16-inch variant with 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of NVMe storage. Unfortunately, this is where the blissfulness ends. It has an HDMI 1.4B port. That's 4K 30 frames a second. There are two USB-C ports on this side. They both can allow video out, so you get a total of 3 monitors out. However, they are just USB 3 Gen 2, which means 10 gigabits for file transfers. They'd also provide file delivery, which includes charging the laptop via USB-C, and then a dual audio jack, both microphone and headset. On the other side, we have the power button, micro SD card, not full, micro. 2 USB-A ports, Gen 1, which means 5 gigabits, and one of them has active charging. Then there's a fingerprint reader. Adds to the price, I guess. Then the trackpad. It's adequate. I don't like it that much, but it's usable. It's a trackpad in a laptop. The keyboard's actually nice. This is one thing Lenovo does very well, and they nailed it here as well. It's just good tactility, backlit, full-size keyboard with function rows. Can't really ask for much more. The speakers are like the trackpad. They're adequate. They are upward firing, but my own cell phone has more bass and treble than these things do. It's louder than this. It's supposed to be Dolby audio. I don't know what that means. It's just enough, I guess. Now, the other part, most important part of this laptop is the monitor. It's a 2-in-1. You're going to be interacting this. It is pen and touch capable. It's 16 inches, very big. 1080p, sure, 60 frames a second. I'm not too mad about that. However, the color accuracy is where the problem occurs. This is a 2-in-1. You're going to be doing RT stuff on this. It is 800:1 contrast ratio and a 45% NTSC. To give you some type of grasp of how low that is, you can't buy the cheapest 1080p monitor to date that will give you anything lower than 75% NTSC.
The webcam is okay. I mean, sub 1000, don't expect much from here. You do have things like automatic framing. So if I go ahead and move my head over, it should adjust. Background blur, you can adjust the blur. This is the most blurry setting that's there. And then there's eye contact. However, I think it doesn't do anything right now. And then creative filters is disabled. I'm assuming it needs the AI NPU stuff that currently doesn't really work on this machine.
Let's talk about the drawing experience, the 2-in-1, the whole kind of reason you might get this, which I think it's a bad reason to get this for, drawing and note-taking. Note-taking, I think, is okay, but drawing specifically is a little bit more problematic. Let me talk about the first issue with this. There's no rubberized feet at the bottom of these things here. Normally for 2-in-1s, there's little rubber feet that will stick up so that when you place it down against a hard surface, you're not scratching up your keyboard or the chassis itself. So I have it on this little foam thing. This shouldn't be the case. It should have rubberized feet. The other thing is I do have a matte screen protector on here, and that's to solve two issues. Obviously, the really bad reflections that you get. So you can kind of see here how much it is and then how much it lessens with the matte screen protector I've installed on top of it. So the matte screen protector is limited in the surface it will cover, but it still does a pretty good job. You lose contrast with that, but it does help with another issue that as you're drawing and you're interacting, you're pinching and you're zooming and stuff, and you make a long line, your finger oils are getting all over this stuff. It's more so when it's on the gloss screen than it is on the matte screen protector. And so you'll be drawing and it'll become rough. That's the standard. There's a lot of resistance because this pen is rubberized. It's really rough and like a lot of resistance when you're drawing, and then you hit that oil spot and it gets really slick. So your consistency for drawing really suffers. The matte screen protector diminishes that, not entirely, but a bit more than if it was just drawing directly on the matte screen, because it kind of all these little dimples and stuff on the matte screen protector kind of obfuscates the oiliness of it, and then you can just quickly like rub it down, and it's easier to get the oils off of this than it is for the base here. I can't tell you how long I spent trying to get all these little finger oils that you can kind of see at the edge here off of this screen. It does not want to come off very easily, even with like an alcohol wipe or any of that stuff. Okay, so that's that. The drawing experience is poor. There's no way around it. You do get 4,000 levels of pressure. The tip is rubberized, so you get some resistance against the gloss screen, as well as the matte screen protector that I put on top of this. Do you have 2 buttons? It is quadruple A. It's fairly light. It's lighter than my Wacom version that I have of this that does effectively the same thing. But this is a 4-year-old pen. It's old tech. There's nothing really to write home about this. There's no tilt support, unfortunately. And more to the point of this, let me just go ahead and do, let me take off stabilization here. We're going to go ahead and do a straight line. This is a pretty quick straight line, but you can see there's already quite a bit of wobble here. And if I try to do like a curved arc line, it's really bad. There's nothing I can say good about this other than if you turn on stabilization that is quite high, then you do have to do a straight line. It's much more improved, a lot less issues in terms of the whole thing here. Another thing is if you have this at a tilt like what I'm used to having at a fairly high tilt, you can't max out the pressure. So even if I try to draw as hard as I want, I can't get as much pressure as if I was to just draw straight down. So I can't even get access to the full range pressure, and you already need to have quite a bit of high activation rate pressure applied to get the pressure to start. So if you're a light drawer trying to draw really quick and stuff like that without stabilization, you're gonna have issues where the pen's just not registering at all. And it's great for touch and stuff like that. The integrated graphics is really good for that. And if it gets really hot, this can go in any orientation, so you can rotate it to vertical view. You don't have to go into your display settings or anything else like that. Not sure why I didn't go into vertical view, but the whole point for that is that there are vents up here that do get really hot. And so having it pointing away from you and not towards you or where your arm's going to be resting, if you're right-handed, is nice. It's nice that it auto-oriented, so if you want a vertical experience, you can do that. It is 16 inches though. It's very, very big. It is also quite high raised up. This is a fairly thick laptop. So when you do want to draw, you're going to want this at an angle, tilt it, because you don't want this where your arm is literally just like all wonky because of how much of a bump it is up from your actual drawing surface. So overall, I think it's adequate. You can get away with drawing on this if you really, really wanted to. I would still recommend just getting a small, cheap pen display if you really want that over a 2-in-1. Get that separate. You can get those used for sometimes like $100. It's not going to be anywhere close to as good as what's available today, but anything, literally anything, is better than this for a drawing experience. Yeah, sure, it's a 2-in-1. It's just really rough for drawing, recommending for drawing. And again, for note taking, it's fine. This little USB adapter holder thing is fine. Hooks onto the side here, if I can find it, over here. And right now it's upside down, but you kind of get the idea. It's a usable 2-in-1. There's a lot to want from this in terms of the actual performance of the pen. And if they had given us the Lenovo Digital Pen 3, we would at least have gotten tilt support, which would help in some capacity.
Okay, performance. At the very bottom of this graph, the purple color, you'll notice that I have a max variant, and that's because this will play an important role for later on other than synthetic benchmarks, using it as it was intended. These benchmarks are not the actual performance you will actually get. I'm going to say actually a lot. The M1 Mac Mini gave a score of like almost 21,000, where the Radeon 780M gave 31 or 30 plus thousand. That's a 50% uplift. That's a lot of performance on table. But if you look at the 970, the GTX 970, the problem with that is that's like 720p gaming in today's world. So you can expect to comfortably play at 720p with some 1080p titles to get at least 30 frames a second or potentially more out of that. So the M1 has been generically underperforming, and that's what I would reference it when you get into things like Blender 3D rendering and some AI work and other stuff that leverages the GPU. And it's not a very strong one. I mentioned this in my last video that I just made about the M1 Mac Mini specifically in 2024. Yeah, it's not that strong. And It's still a heck of a lot better than anything that has come before that, except for the 780M and maybe the 760M as well. But yeah, just keep an eye on that max number or the max variant, because this will be an important part as we move on. This next one was impressive, at least when I saw the numbers. And I looked on the internet, and yeah, the 8845HS processor is on par with the 12600K or KF. That's nuts. That's a desktop processor. Yeah, it's an i5, but still, it's a desktop processor that uses 125 watts, and we're using only 45. And then compared to the M1 Mac Mini, yeah, it's 4 years old, but uh, the multi-core performance is 30% better. So that's crazy. That's crazy to think that the 8845HS has this much power and performance in it. However, something I have to close with for these two graphs is that these are short, bursty, synthetic benchmarks. These are not real world scenarios, because AMD, specifically with their integrated graphics, does not have the best support. And I'm going to show this right after. Okay, I have to explain the difference between what you're seeing here and the max variance. When I have this computer or the laptop plugged in, it's set to best performance. It's the numbers you see. It's for the 8845HS without the max variant on it. In order to get that max variant, you need to go to your BIOS. When you first boot up your computer, you press like F1 or something like that. You go to your BIOS, you set the cooling profile to maximum performance. That's actually not the cooling profile. That's the, I think, total wattage or voltage you can push through your laptop. You then get that performance that you saw in those synthetic benchmarks. And that's because for any long running tasks, because these are well over excess of 2 to 4 minutes, you get throttled down. And there's like burst stuff where you see the 5 point whatever gigahertz stuff. Then there's all core boost, which is also temporary. And then there's sustained all core boost, which is much, much lower. And unless you have that BIOS setting set to max, that sustained long term boost is lower. It's 15% lower than what you'll see advertised for that processor. So if you look at the 12600KF and the 8845HS with the max settings, they are basically neck and neck. That's where they should be when you're doing long renders like this. And you're not getting that. The problem with doing this whole plug in best performance, set it to max in the BIOS, is that then your laptop goes from about 40 decibels to 60. It is louder than my desktop machine when I turn it on for the first time before the fans kind of calm down. This is a very, very loud laptop when you set it to that max performance. This is not something you can use in a public setting. It is that loud. AI. 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 This is Ollama's AI LLM performance for various models. This is a whole, you type in some text and it generates an answer type of thing. And you can see the max is again an important factor here. But a critical junction point is that currently the NPU, and more specifically the GPU, cannot be leveraged on Windows with Ollama. Unless you're using PyTorch or like TensorFlow, you can't actually access the GPU or NPU. There's just nothing built into the ROCm or HIP implementation to leverage the current GPU in this scenario. So unfortunately, you're going to see the IdeaPad 5 CPU at the very, very top, which means that it's the worst performing. And the Max is the next one down. It's still not even on par of the M1 Mac Mini that has that, 50% less GPU performance, that 30% less multi-core performance, and yet it can still outperform this in AI test. So right below that, then you see the IdeaPad with the CPU and GPU. That is if you run Linux on this, if you manually compile ROCm, the SDK for Radeon Open Compute stuff, and you override the Ollama settings to leverage all of that. And again, it's Linux only, because currently Windows does not have any of this support. And so the only thing I want to say here about this like AI crap is specifically AMD has to do something to allow these open source projects like Stable Diffusion, like Ollama, to easily get access to not just the GPU, because actually that's not even possible right now, but also the NPU. They need to be pulling in pull requests to do this work, to get the NPU that is on board this CPU or this chipset. I'm not sure what to really call it because it's there, but we can't access it right now on Windows.